what takes us generally to a negative space? It's not like we're walking along and we decide, hey, I want to be angry, I want to shout, I want to scream and get emotional and get into a negative relationship. What happens is we generally have a stressor. Let's call it a stressor, okay? What else? We may even call it a trigger, okay? All right? And it can be something at a physical level where someone does something physically against us. Generally, in a so-called, maybe we call it civilized society, people may act mentally or emotionally against us, where they may say something we disagree with, and it can irk us because the more value we place on something, the more we will get emotional about it. The more importance we place on it, the more power we give someone, the more that they say something against us, the more it impacts on us at a negative level. All right? And as much as it's physical, mental, and emotional, we will look at it as a stress or a trigger. And what that does, it impacts on us. How? At a very basic level, we may say it impacts on our emotions. How? Again, we get angry, we may get frustrated, we may get irritable. We may not even show those emotions. But what happens is our boat on the ocean is kind of upset, right? As in, it rocks to and fro. Why? Because the waves have been set in motion. Whatever is said, we hear it, we see it, and it gets us going. And all the energy molecules in our mind just go crazy. And we've all experienced that. And generally, what do we do when we get angry? We may get angry back at the person. We may shout, scream. Okay, and something very interesting at an emotional level. Has anyone won an argument in their life before? Yes, right? You all won arguments. But at some degree, this is very important. When you win an argument, you may end up destroying the relationship. One goes, they have an inverse relationship. An argument and a relationship. As much as you argue with your partner, you agree sometimes it takes a couple of seconds, minutes, sometimes to repair it. But you know, as adults, it can sometimes take days, months, or years. And sometimes it never gets repaired. Because whatever has been said cannot sometimes be taken back. It destroys the relationship. It doesn't have to be also what you said, it's what you have done destroys a relationship. So there again, the trigger can be a physical trigger. As much as you may be the greatest partner, husband, wife to your spouse, at some level, whatever you do physically, mentally, emotionally impacts on them at an emotional level. All right? And as much as you get angry, you may shout, it sets us in motion. Now the problem is some of us, when we get emotional, it may even get to the point where we become physical. Okay? Now, at some point, we may say this in jest, but there's an element of truth, is that when you get emotional and you find, as you may say, I am impulsive, I get angry easily, I get sad easily, or I'm chronically sad, I'm chronically anxious, you go see your psychiatrist. Okay? When you get physical, though, where you beat someone up because of your anger, your irritation and frustration, some would say in jest, maybe you need to go see your lawyer rather than your psychiatrist. Okay? And we don't want to get to that level. What I'm also basically saying, at some level, as much as you may say, my doctor needs to sort out my treatment or sort out my anger, you are fundamentally responsible. Because as much as you're angry, and a cop, as we call them, pitches up, suddenly we all become very subdued. Why? It has nothing to do with medication. It's the fact that someone with power has come along, and if you continue to stay angry, it may be to your detriment. Okay? Now, the problem, as I said, is that we all are at some level set in motion by what we place value on, what we place importance to. And you may have even experienced it while you're here, that someone does something to you that gets you going. Why? Because if you're here for be it 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, whatever happens in this place impacts on you at a personal level. However, if you know you are leaving tomorrow, it wouldn't matter to you. You agree? Why? Because you are leaving. It doesn't matter anymore. You have not placed value, importance on what is happening here. Okay? Because you know, as much as you may sympathize with your colleagues with what they may have to undergo for the next few weeks, you may be calm, cool, collected because you have not allowed it to be of value to you. And what happens is, we then, when you don't give it value, we may react, I'm going to use, at a mental level, where you may disagree what has been said in this environment, but it doesn't get you emotionally because it has less value to you. And there you find we generally act, when we act from a mental space, we generally may agree or disagree. We may even become cynical or sarcastic about what's being said, but we don't necessarily get too emotional about it. When we get emotional, it's the fact that we have some vested interest in what's going on. We may have an agenda related to what's going on. We may take it at a personal level. And some of us get to the extreme where we may even act physically. And you may, fortunately with time, learn to control yourself physically, but you know your heart rate's gone up, you're sweating, you're shaking, you're trembling. Why? Because it's completely overwhelmed you. The other day even someone said something which I might have disagreed with, and I couldn't sleep at night. So that had affected me at a physical level. Maybe my reaction to the situation, my response to the situation, whatever it was, got impacted on. And if you take it to the point of impulsivity, what we do is, generally, if you look at this strata, is that when we have a stress or trigger, you and I, over the years, have wired our brain. And the problem with how we wire our brain is that's how we fire. So when we have the stress or trigger, bang, we fire. Because why? We have we're ready for action. What happens is, given a certain stress or trigger and it triggers something within you, you impulsively react to the situation. We're constantly in that fight, flight, fright mode. And this demands where you and I need to learn self-control. And again, I use this expression a lot. There's a beautiful biblical statement. Be quick to listen, slow to talk and anger. Now, you might say, how do I inculcate this? How do I live by that? You and I need to deliberately, consciously learn to control ourselves. As much as you and I are tempted to react because you sense danger, in fact, that's another word we can put up here, danger. Because what happens when we have a stress or a trigger? It elicits danger. When we sense danger, we have to protect ourselves. And if you look at it, all three levels, your mind is at the fore. Your mind's job is to protect you. So if you feel you are under threat, you are going to whack the danger out of the arena. If it's a football, you kick it out of the ballpark. Or in baseball, you hit it with a bat out of the arena. What happens is you view life as dangerous. Now I'm going to share something with you. As much as, where does that instinct come from? That reaction to danger. It probably goes back generations where there were wild animals about, and if there was suddenly you saw something, heard something growling at the door, you kind of stood up immediately and you were in action. All right? You were ready to fight. Anyone had a lion pitch at the door lately? In this day and age? Or a lioness or a tiger? Not that we have many in this country. No. In fact, if it did pitch, it would make front page news. All right? Okay? All right? The thing is, in this day and age, fortunately, hopefully, there are not that many natural disasters to react to. But it has become instinctive. So why do we react impulsively in this day and age? What is the threat if it's no more a lion or a lioness? It usually is other people in our lives. And I hope it didn't get to a point where they were violent towards you. But what we do, over the years, what we have done with that fight, flight, fright instinct is we've turned it around and shifted it to relationships. The people in our lives, in terms of immediate or extended family or even our community, and people in our workplace. However, at our workplace, sometimes we hopefully are a bit more measured in how we react. Why? Because we recognize on which side our bread is buttered and who who's it being butted by, as in they provide the salary. You agree? In fact, something very interesting, I just had to share this with someone this morning. What is the basic principle you need to follow in your workplace in order to facilitate a relationship with your senior colleague? You have to agree on how they see the world. If you disagree, it can be a mental perspective. At some point, it'll get emotional. God forbid it gets physical. All right? You need to agree. And where the challenge is that as much as you agree on how your boss sees the world, the problem is that at some level, you are your own person. You have your own identity, your own ego, your own way of seeing the world. And what happens is that creates conflict and tension. If you are working in an industry where they have a diverse view to how you see life, it's difficult for both your paths to meet. And as much as we speak about the workplace, that's where the tension comes in relationships. Because prior to this, most of us, if we were using, for example, substances, normalize the using of substances. I just use it to get through the day, we might say to ourselves. We might argue, I was functional, I was providing while I was working. What the mind is doing is justifying its way of operating. Its operating system is the way it works. If you slept all Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you woke up on Monday and you were ready for work, that's all you felt you needed to do. Some of us may say, geez, parenting, being a partner is secondary. And we kind of let it go until one day we will old. The problem is then the substances guide our lives and we are destroying relationships because people want beyond just communication, connection. And what's happening is while we're using and we're justifying, we're normalizing our network of operating. But the people you're in a relationship with don't see it that way. As far as they're concerned, is we are acting abnormally if we are using. We are behaving wrongly. However, if we have to admit to that, that means our whole perspective on who we are is wrong. And we struggle with that. We don't want to let it go. So one of the biggest challenges we face, this. In fact, we see it as the therapists. For those who come in here seeking help for their substance use, was the decision to get help. Once you're in, why is it easier? And not many of us are saying on the first or second or third day, I'm out of here. Why? What changes? Because once we join the group that is in here, let's call it like a tribe or the herd that's in here, right? Is that you recognize what you normalize, even with those who you would have hung out with, say a week, a month before, and they're in here, they have all recognized that it's not necessarily the right way of living. As much as you normalize it, you recognize it's abnormal. And fortunately, there's a bit of direction in that everyone in this room at some level wants to change their lives. So what's fascinating, as much as a therapist or your family spent hours convincing you of coming in here, once you're in here, you recognize, geez, I'm actually just part of a group that needs to shift. And everyone in the group is shifting. Some of them are worse than you in terms of substance use. And some of them you would consider mild, like, geez, what are you doing here? And there's a fundamental then to shift our lives. So what happens is, there's the stress, there's the danger, we react emotionally. We don't want to get to a physical level. We may be able to, I'll even use the word stifle it to the point that it just is a mental disagreement, all right? And what you do is recognize to be emotional, you've given it power, value, meaning. At an emotional level, you have dropped the power, value, meaning. And you may get to a point where, I'll put a question mark, where at some point, someone says something or people do something. For example, we may say there was a volcano eruption in another country, on another part of the world. Okay, let's say there's an active volcano in Iceland. Okay, I'm not saying there is one, but just imagine a scenario. No one in this room reacts, be it even emotionally or mentally or physically. It's like, you're indifferent, if I can add that. Why? because it has no bearing on your own personal life. It has no value, you may say. You know no one in Iceland. To you, Iceland is another country. As much as in this particular country, you know what the stats are for COVID, but you don't read through every single stats of every single country and say, gee whiz, wow, they are going, you may say they're going through a bad patch, but you don't have any emotional attachment. The only countries you may be concerned about is the country you're in and your family are in. Okay, just the other day I heard that New Zealand had gone onto lockdown because the Delta variant had been there. And that too I heard in a WhatsApp group where a friend was living in the country. But no one necessarily reacted emotionally. Why? Because it had no necessary value to them because they were not in the New Zealand. So what happens is you learn how to shift value, importance to that which is valuable and important. In fact, a book along those lines is the book Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And in the end, it's all small stuff. And you need to learn to place value, importance, power on that which you consider important in terms of your purpose, your meaning, your truth in life. And that's what's fundamental. So you don't necessarily then react, behave impulsively, snap at that which has no value.